Ever feel like you're just drowning in information? Articles, news, research. It's constant. And trying to figure out what's actually important, what really matters. It can feel, well, almost impossible sometimes. How do you actually cut through all that noise? Well, that's exactly what we're trying to do here. We've grabbed a whole stack of really diverse sources for this deep dive. Our mission: to pull out the key nuggets, the surprising facts, basically be your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed on some pretty interesting stuff.
And you're right, the variety today is, wow, it's something else. We're covering everything from why we buy things and how relationships work, all the way to some pretty stark historical ultimatums and even how nature designs things. It's going to be a wide-ranging chat, for sure.
Absolutely. And look, we're not just here to summarize things you could read elsewhere. We really want to uncover those unexpected links, pull out insights you can actually use. So yeah, lean in. You're about to discover some things that might really make you think. The deep dive into consumerism. Are we buying too much? Okay, let's jump right in with something that probably hits close to home for a lot of us. Are we buying too much? One of our sources mentioned this 2012 global survey. Really striking. It found half of people admitted buying things they didn't actually need. And get this, 2/3 were worried they were overbuying. There's a real paradox there, isn't there? We think buying more will make us happy, but often it just leads to more stress, more unhappiness, not satisfaction.
And what's really fascinating is why we keep doing it, even when we feel that way. We're just constantly bombarded with marketing, nonstop. And the whole point, as the sources explain, is to make us feel like we need things we just want. It's all about emotion, ads, the shopping experience itself. It's all designed to hit us emotionally. One source talks about how we build up these elaborate fantasies about finding and owning something new. Marketing expert Jim Pooler even said buyers can get this adrenaline rush while shopping. And retailers know this, right? Because it leads to weakened defenses, as he put it. Makes us more likely to buy impulsively.
So it's less about logic, do I need this, and more about that feeling, that emotional hit. Our sources broke down 3 key promises marketing makes and then the sort of tougher realities behind them. First promise: buying this thing will improve your quality of life. Marketers are brilliant at linking products to our deepest desires. Better health, feeling secure, less stress, even closer relationships. Buy this, get that happy life.
But the reality check can be pretty harsh. More possessions often means, well, less quality of life, ironically. Think about it. More stuff takes more time, more money to look after, to maintain. That can mean more debt, more stress, and actually less time for the important things, like family and friends. It reminds me of that ancient principle, Luke 12.15. It says something like, even when a person has an abundance, his life does not result from the things he possesses. It's a good reminder that real fulfillment isn't found in stuff.
Yeah, that really resonates. And the second promise was particularly striking: gain status and prestige. Hey, the source mentioned Jim Pooler again, observing that when people shop, a big part of it is competing with friends, neighbors, coworkers, even relatives. You see those ads all the time, right? Successful, rich-looking people enjoying some product. And the message, subtle or not, is this could be you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the reality is, if you define your self-worth by comparing yourself to others, well, it's a race you can never win. It just creates this endless cycle of dissatisfaction. You reach one level and immediately you're looking at the next. Like Ecclesiastes 5.10 says, a mere lover of silver will not be satisfied with silver. The goal just keeps shifting.
Which leads right into the third big promise: define your identity. There's this book, Shiny Objects, that explains how we often use possessions to signal who we are, or maybe who we wish we were. And marketers are masters at this, aren't they? Linking brands, especially fancy ones, to certain lifestyles or values. Want to be seen as stylish or athletic? Just buy the right brand and poof, you adopt that identity, or so they promise.
But the crucial reality check here is no product can actually change who you are deep down. It can't buy you qualities like honesty or integrity. The source pointed to 1 Peter 3.3 and 4. It says, basically, don't let your adornment be outward things like gold or clothes, but let it be the secret person of the heart. Your real identity isn't for sale.
So the bottom line seems to be that consumerism taps into real human needs, belonging, self-worth, well-being, but offers these superficial material fixes that often leave us feeling more anxious, not less, more unfulfilled, recognizing that psychological game is key. But okay, understanding why is one thing. The big question for many of us is, how do we actually get control back? Our sources had some really practical advice on managing spending habits.
They did, and it's very concrete. First, resist that impulse buy. If you love the thrill of a bargain, watch out. Slow down. Think about the long run, owning it, storing it, maintaining it. Remember past regrets. Give yourself a cool down period before clicking buy. Second, don't shop to change your mood. Sure, it might give a temporary lift, but those bad feelings usually come back. Better to reach out to a friend or maybe just go for a walk, get some exercise. Third, shopping isn't recreation. Malls, the internet, they're designed to make you want things. Only shop when you need something specific. Have a plan, stick to it. Fourth, think about who you hang out with. If you find yourself spending just to keep up, maybe look for friends who value things other than money and possessions. Fifth, be smart with credit cards. Really try to pay the full balance each month. Know the interest rates, the fees. Be careful with those premium cards. For big things, save up, pay cash if you can. And finally, number 6, know where you stand financially. Keep records. Make a real monthly spending plan, income versus expenses. Track where the money actually goes. And hey, if you're struggling with the numbers, don't be afraid to ask a trusted friend for help.
That's a really solid framework. I definitely feel called out on the impulse buying. That cool down period sounds like something I personally need to try. And speaking of sneaky tactics, the sources also mention some newer marketing methods, like product placement. Seeing brands in TV shows or movies. And then there's stealth marketing. Paid actors pretending to be regular people talking up a product. Wow. Plus word-of-mouth marketing where people get rewards for mentioning products to friends or online. It's a totally different world out there.
It really is. And a major target, unfortunately, is kids. In the US alone, teenagers are like a multi-billion-dollar market every year. Researcher Juliet Shore found something pretty concerning. Kids who are really into consumer culture, they tend to have higher rates of depression, anxiety, and even worse relationships with their parents. It's something to think about, the long-term impact.
That's a really powerful reason for parents to be aware. The source offered some good strategies parents have used, like educating kids. James and Jessica, for example, they explained to their girls that advertisers have an agenda, that they aren't always looking out for their best interests. Others focus on staying in control. Scott and Kelly, they didn't just give in to pressure. They talked to their daughter about limits, about balance, and some just limit exposure. John and Jennifer's family, they watch very little TV. They fill time with other things, cooking together, eating, reading. Simple stuff, but effective. 2, surprising global facts and a biblical viewpoint. Okay, so from how we chase satisfaction, let's shift gears a bit. Let's broaden the view to some global snapshots. Quick, surprising facts. Let's go watching the world.
All right, first up, the World Health Organization. They've concluded that diesel exhaust, it's linked to a higher risk for lung cancer and maybe bladder cancer too. Something to think about in traffic jams.
Wow. Okay, and then this is amazing. Antarctica. They found fossilized pollen deep under the seabed, and it shows Antarctica used to have palm trees near tropical forests.
Yeah, during the Eocene greenhouse period, we're talking like 34 to 56 million years ago, much warmer planet. Winters there were mild, basically frost-free. Can you imagine? Antarctica warm and lush.
Mind-blowing. Okay, different part of the world. Ireland. A 2012 report from Catholic priests there showed huge support among surveyed Catholics for letting priests marry, like 87%.
Mm-hmm. And 77% thought women should be allowed into the priesthood. Shows how views can shift, even within long-standing institutions.
Then a really serious issue, fake medicines. In parts of sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, tests on antimalarial drugs found a scary amount were substandard or outright fake.
Yeah, leading to treatments just not working, like 36% counterfeit in Southeast Asia, 20% in sub-Saharan Africa in those studies. It's a huge public health crisis.
Devastating. Okay, let's end this section on a hopeful note. El Salvador.
Right. In mid-April 2012, they actually had their first murder-free day in almost 3 years, which is incredible for a country that had one of the world's worst homicide rates in 2011, 69 per 100,000 people. A small sign of progress, but a significant one.
Wow, some really diverse snapshots there. Okay, let's pivot again. From the visible world to something maybe less visible, but deeply felt by many. The Bible's viewpoint on Satan. This is a topic where beliefs really vary, right? So the first big question. Is Satan presented as a real person?
Well, some people definitely see Satan as more of an abstract idea,
Yeah.
The evil within us. But the source we looked at, drawing from its interpretation of the Bible, presents him quite differently as a real individual, a rebel angel, a spirit being who opposes God. He's even called the ruler of this world, and it talks about him using lying signs and deception. There's even that conversation recorded between Satan and God in the book of Job. That wouldn't make sense if Satan was just an abstract concept, right? Revelation 12.9 explicitly says he is misleading the entire inhabited earth. The surprising thing here, perhaps, is how this view shifts blame. Instead of evil being just an internal flaw or something God allows, it frames it as a struggle against an active external adversary.
Okay, so if this viewpoint sees him as a real being, where does it say he lives? Not a fiery hell or inside people?
Right, the common ideas are often different. The Bible describes him as a spirit creature, so he exists in an invisible realm, not a physical place like we understand. The source says he used to have access to God's presence, like in that Job account, but now he's been cast out, confined to the vicinity of the earth, along with other rebellious spirits. Revelation 12:12 talks about that. There's a mention of Pergamum being where Satan is dwelling, but the source interprets that as a place with a high concentration of his worship, not his actual home address. Luke 4 says he holds sway over all the kingdoms of the inhabited earth. So his influence is global, not geographically fixed.
That's a key distinction. So if he's real and around Earth, can he directly affect people, harm them, or is it more subtle?
The source suggests most of humanity has sort of yielded to his influence, falling under his power, as 2 Corinthians implies. And that pervasive influence is presented as a key reason for the difficult conditions we see in the world. The Bible does record some extreme cases where Satan or other rebel angels apparently cause direct physical harm. You find accounts in Matthew and Mark. And 1 John 5:19 puts it very bluntly, the whole world is lying in the power of the wicked one.
Okay, given that perspective, how does someone avoid that influence? What's the practical advice?
Well, first, learn his methods. Be aware. 2 Corinthians 2:11 says not to be ignorant of his designs. Reading the Bible is seen as crucial for understanding his tactics. Then there's advice to get rid of anything connected to demonism amulets, things used in spiritism like trying to contact the dead, or divination trying to predict the future supernaturally. Acts 19:1 gives an example of early Christians doing that. And finally, the core advice is to actively resist. James 4:7 says, oppose the devil and he will flee from you. End quote. This means following Bible counsel, which is seen as a form of protection. Ephesians 6 talks about putting on spiritual armor. 3, navigating relationships and unpacking history.
All right, let's shift from those bigger spiritual questions back to something very personal, our relationships. Specifically, how to handle the silent treatment in families. It's such a common and painful dynamic, isn't it? Two people who promise to love each other just stop talking. For hours, maybe days, leaving everything unresolved. It feels awful.
It does. And understanding why it happens can be really helpful. Our sources point to 2 main drivers. First, it can be retaliation. Basically, you hurt me, so I'm going to hurt you back by shutting you out. Second, it can be manipulation, using silence to get your way, hoping the other person will just give in to make the silence stop. Now, this is different from agreeing to take a quick time out to cool down, right? Ecclesiastes says there's a time to keep quiet, and sometimes that's needed. But using silence as a weapon for revenge or control, that just makes the conflict drag on and really damages respect in the relationship. It's destructive.
Yeah, it just digs the hole deeper, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So if you recognize this happening, what can you actually do to break that pattern?
Well, the very first step is just recognizing it for what it is, a tactic, and usually not a very good one long term. Ask yourself, is this really how I want to treat someone I care about? Beyond that, 3 key things. 1, be discerning. Don't just react to heated words like you never listen. Try to hear the feeling behind it. Maybe it means, I feel like you're not taking me seriously. Proverbs says being slow to anger helps with discernment. 2, lower your voice. Seriously, it works. Arguments feed on escalation. If you soften your tone, maybe acknowledge their point of view, even if you disagree, it can totally change the dynamic. Like Proverbs says, where there's no wood, the fire goes out, etc. And 3, think we, not me. See your partner as your teammate, not your opponent. When you do that, you're less likely to get offended, less likely to argue, less likely to clam up. 1 Corinthians says to look out for the other person's advantage, not just your own. And Ecclesiastes warns against being quick to take offense.
That makes so much sense. It reminds me of this analogy I read once, maybe from Awake magazine. Throw the ball gently. It ties into that verse, Colossians 4:6. Let your utterance be always with graciousness. The idea is, like in catch, you don't whip the ball so hard it hurts the other person. Same with words. Bitter remarks just wound. But if you speak gently, graciously, your partner can actually catch your point. It's about communication, not winning.
That's a perfect analogy, because the silent treatment just goes completely against that biblical advice for love and respect in marriage from Ephesians 5:33. Ultimately, the best thing is probably for a couple to agree ahead of time,
Yeah.
the silent treatment. It's just not okay for us. It's off limits because it hurts the relationship.
Good advice. Okay, speaking of different ways people live and connect, let's take a quick trip now. Our sources offered a visit to Panama.
Yeah, Panama. Famous for the canal, obviously, connecting the Atlantic and Pacific. But it's also that crucial land bridge between North and South America. And it's incredibly diverse, lots of different cultures, a real mix of indigenous and European heritage.
Yeah, the sources highlighted the indigenous Guna people. That was fascinating. Many live in the Sandbloss Islands and along the coast, still hunting, fishing from dugout canoes, growing their food, really connected to their traditions.
And they have this unique custom. When a man marries, he actually goes to live with his wife's family and works for them. He can only set up his own home after they have a daughter. It's a really different way of structuring family and work life compared to what many of us know.
And that diversity shows up spiritually, too. About 300 congregations of Jehovah's Witnesses there. And meetings aren't just in Spanish. They're in Chinese, English, Gujarati, Guna, Haitian Creole, and Gaber, even Panamanian Sign Language. Shows the rich mix of people.
Just a few quick facts to round it out. Population around 3.6 million back then. Capital, Panama City. Spanish is official. It's a constitutional democracy, tropical climate, lots of mountains, rainforests, savannas, and over 1,600 islands. Oh, and get this, the Panamanian golden frog. It apparently waves its arms and legs to attract mates or warn rivals. How cool is that?
Waving frogs. Okay, love it. Now let's shift from that fascinating culture to something much darker. A historical account that's honestly quite disturbing. It's titled An Ultimatum in God's Name. About the Spanish requirement, or el requerimiento. What was this?
It was an official document, a proclamation. Spanish conquistadors in the 16th century were supposed to read it aloud when they arrived in the Americas to conquer new lands. And the text is chilling. It basically said to the indigenous people, you must accept the authority of the Catholic Church and the King of Spain. And then it said, if you do not do this, with God's aid, I shall enter with power among you, make war on you, take your wives and children and make them slaves, take your property, and shall do you all the harm I can. And the deaths and harm which shall thereby come will be by your fault and not ours.
So, submit or face war, slavery, death.
Yeah.
And it's your fault. That's unbelievable. What was the justification? How did this even come about?
Well, after Columbus, the Pope had tried to settle land disputes between Spain and Portugal. Part of the deal was they had to try and convert the native populations. The Spanish monarchy twisted this into a justification for conquest. They used this requirement to claim they had a divine right, God's blessing, to take over the lands and control the people if they resisted conversion and Spanish rule. It was based on that idea of the divine right of kings.
But how was it actually used? It sounds completely impractical, besides being unjust.
It was often a total farce. Sources say it was sometimes read from ships too far away for anyone on shore to hear, or read to people who had no idea what Spanish or Latin sounded like. Sometimes read to empty villages after everyone had fled in terror. It was often just a technicality to legitimize the violence that followed, and the consequences were brutal. One example cited was around 2,000 Araucanians killed in Chile in 1550 after the requirement was read. The conquistador Pedro de Valdivia even wrote about cutting off the hands and noses of captured natives who resisted. It's grim reading.
Were there people at the time who saw how wrong this was?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There were strong condemnations. A missionary friar, Bartolomé de las Casas, who saw it firsthand, called it unjust, impious, scandalous, irrational, and absurd. He was horrified by the damage it did to the perception of Christianity. Another chronicler, Gonzalo Fernández de Oviedo, agreed, lamenting that these atrocities gave the indigenous people a terrible first impression of the faith the Spanish claimed to represent.
It really raises that question, doesn't it? When atrocities are committed in God's name, is God somehow to blame?
That's a crucial point. The source quotes the Bible itself, Job 34:10. Or be it from the true God to act wickedly and the Almighty to act unjustly. The blame lies squarely with the humans carrying out the actions. Thankfully, the requirement itself was eventually abolished in 1573. But as one Jesuit professor noted, powerful groups often just concoct causes to excuse the violence they want to commit anyway. It's a sobering historical lesson. A look at design in nature.
Okay, let's shift one last time, ending on something truly amazing from the natural world. The flipper of the humpback whale. These whales are enormous, right? Bigger than a bus, heavier too. Yet somehow, they're incredibly agile underwater. Twisting, turning, how do they do that?
Well, the secret, researchers found, isn't what you might expect. It's in the bumps. On the leading edge of their flippers, they have these large, irregular bumps called tubercles. Most other whales have smooth flippers, but the humpback's design is unique, almost looks lumpy.
Bumps make it more agile. How does that work?
It's called the tubercle effect. As water flows over those bumps, it doesn't just break away smoothly. It breaks into tiny, controlled swirls or vortices. These bumps actually channel the water flow and create a kind of managed turbulence right next to the flipper.
Okay, and what does that do for the whale?
It does two amazing things. First, it gives the flipper significantly more lift. This lets the whale tilt its flippers at a much steeper angle without stalling losing lift like an airplane wing might. Second, at those high angles, the bumps actually reduce drag compared to a smooth flipper. More lift, less drag, especially with those super long flippers they have, about a third of their body length. That's the key to their surprising agility.
Wow, that's incredible. Nature's engineering. Are we learning from this?
Absolutely. Researchers are already applying this tubercle effect. They're using the concept to design things like more efficient boat rudders, better water turbines, even windmill blades and helicopter rotors that perform better. It's biomimicry at its best.
That's fantastic. Taking a design perfected over who knows how long and using it for our own technology.
It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? You see this incredibly elegant, efficient solution to a complex engineering problem in nature. It's humbling, really. Which leads to that final question the source posed. What do you think? Did the humpback whale's amazing flipper just happen by chance through evolution? Or was it designed? Something to ponder.
Outro.
Wow. What a journey today. We really covered a lot of ground, didn't we? From the psychology of why we buy things to relationship tips, quick global facts, that disturbing history lesson, and ending with whale flippers.
Yeah, it was quite the mix. But the common thread, I think, is finding clarity. Gaining insights from places you might not expect. It really pushes you to think critically about the world around you. Look beyond the surface.
Exactly. And seeing the connections. How understanding consumer psychology might relate to historical motivations, or how nature's solutions can inspire us. It deepens your appreciation for everything. Being well-informed isn't just about knowing facts, is it? It's about seeing the bigger picture. Definitely. And maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to take away. Just reflect on this. How understanding the why behind something, whether it's your own urge to buy something or a breakdown in communication or even a big historical event, how that understanding can actually change how you react, how it can help you choose your own path forward more intentionally, something to think about.